Welcome to Partly Crafting. My name is Thomas and today I'm going to be showing you how I made my entry for Enchanterium's Magical Girl collab over on Patreon. When I started designing this doll, I knew there were a few main key features that I wanted to keep in the design as close as possible to keep it in that magical girl vibe that we all know and love so much. So I made sure to give him some really long, sparkly long hair and lots of layers with like shiny fabrics and then sheer fabrics on top. So I've got him in some white satin trousers and a white satin shirt with some blue like organza sleeves and trousers going over the top. Lots of just layers and glitter and color. I really wanted to go all out for this doll because that's what the theme of Magical Girls is. Everything's so intense all the time, so intense. So I wanted to sit with that a little bit. I'm giving him two capes on his shoulders, very much like in Frozen 2 that Elsa has, if you can remember that. And then I wanted to include emblems. Magical Girls always have just a crazy amount of emblems all the time to brand each of the characters, so you know who's who and what their powers are. So I decided to give him a big raindrop on his chest, as you can see there, and a crown with another raindrop emblem on the forehead. I also decided to give him some like rain trickling down his hair coming from the crown, but you can't see that in the drawing because it's behind him, but it looks really cool. And lots of rhinestones, layers, colors. That was my general vibe. Now to start customizing. I've already started by pre-preparing the doll by removing its face and hair and painting it the correct skin tone that I want for my character. I'm using a BTS doll as a base because the body type kind of perfectly fits that anime style that I'm going for. And I can begin the reroute with nylon doll hair from dollyhair.com. This was actually my first time ever customizing a doll with a nylon reroute, and I actually really enjoyed it. I'll definitely be doing it again. I ordered off of dollyhair.com, so to make the postage worth it from America, I did order quite a bit. So you might be seeing more nylon hair in the future, but it works really well. It doesn't really knot very easily, and it's very, very soft. So I very much do recommend. It's in the color Lapis Sapphire, and I got it in the size Barbie long, which means that folded over and rooted into the head, it goes down to his kind of mid-calf to ankle level, which is really, really good for the style that I'm going for. I'm so happy with how the reroute came out. His hair's really got this colourful glow to it that I'm really enjoying. Now that I've finished, I can use Uhu glue to protect the roots and make sure they don't just fall out of his head when any pressure is put on them. So to do that, I'm just squeezing in some Uhu glue, which is an all-purpose glue, into his head, and then I squish his head around to get them all covered and leave it to dry for a day to make sure that it doesn't stay tacky inside of the head and then seep out. As you can see, I protected his hair by wrapping it up in a scrap piece of fabric. I've reunited his head with his body, and I've sprayed the body and head with 2 layers of Mr. Super Clear, so now I can start with body blushing. It was really important for this doll to body blush, not only because it just brings life to a doll, and I'm trying to do it with more of my dolls, but also because he's wearing a crop top. I feel like it would look a bit weird just to have a plain plastic stomach with no kind of depth to it, so I'm making sure to contour especially around that kind of lower chest area and his face. And now it is time for the face up. This was like a really challenging face up for me. The BTS dolls have a semi-real face sculpt, so instead of being a full cartoon or fully realistic, they're somewhere in between, which can have a bit of a tendency to look a little bit uncanny valley if you're not used to it, and I'm definitely not used to it, but I think I did pretty well. So as you can see, just to get in the baselines of the whites of the eyes, I started with my nail art brushes, and then to fill in more of the details like the eyebrows and the irises, I went in with my Arteza watercolor pencils. I want to keep this character really monochrome because most Magical Girl characters kind of have a designated color and that's all they wear. So I wanted to make sure that he had blue eyes and blue eyebrows and blue hair and blue clothes. So yeah, he's going to have a lot of blue, but I don't really mind because blue is my favorite color. It's why I chose water as his theme. And I'm really happy with this face up. I chose not to give him pupils. I obviously made the irises blue, but I felt like having black pupils in the middle, I would run out of space and then he'd have like black eyes. So I just left it with the blue to have a more like simple cartoony look. And I think it works really well on his face. Okay, so to begin the clothes for this doll, I really wanted to make sure that I got them on point, so I did quite a bit of pattern drafting and actually cut these pieces out from a modified version of Delightful's Monster High boy clothes patterns, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. I began by creating all of the hems by just folding over the pieces and using Uhu glue. On curved hems and seams, remember to always cut your curves so that they sit flat across the body when they're folded over. Now that all the pieces are cut out and prepared, I can sew them together at the shoulder and side seams. These are really small seams, so make sure to get your stitch length really small and always sew with paper underneath. So here I'm working on the trousers. These were an absolute nightmare to get right because it was such a non-stretch material that frays in seconds. So if you pull it in the wrong direction, it just kind of explodes and you've got to start again. It's a nightmare. As you can see, as I'm ironing, it's just falling apart. But I managed it very well. I decided to sew everything with a zigzag stitch to make sure it didn't fray and just fall apart over time. And it's held up pretty well so far. So that's good. But I would say be very careful when working with these satin materials. I would even recommend a French seam, which I did do on the organza later, but I didn't do it for the trousers because I just couldn't figure it out. It ended up turning into like just an unworkable piece of material. But if you can figure that out, do it. Now that all of the main components of his outfit are finished, I can move on to my favorite part of his costume, which is the sheer organza pieces. I ordered this massive roll of sheer organza, which is meant for like the back of chairs at weddings. I got it off of Amazon, I'll link it in the description. And it's just like a perfect turquoisey blue color that I thought would work really well. Now, this doll is actually the one that I drafted, the baggy trousers pattern that I made for my Espeon doll, and that I've used it on both of them, and it works really well. So if you want me to kind of try and release the pattern or something, definitely let me know because it's very versatile. Here I am creating the French seams, where you sew the seams in the wrong direction first, and then you flip it back over itself, and then you sew them again, so then on the inside of the garment there's no actual raw seams coming apart. This is really important for something like organza because it's such a fine material that it will just disintegrate in your hands. Like genuinely, this stuff, you cut it and it frays, so it's really important to go through any like protective measures you can. And it was a lot easier to do French seams on the inside of the trousers for this one because the trousers are so baggy. This is what the trousers look all finished. I really like how they look, and they create this kind of glittery aura over his trousers. So now we can move on to the bolero. Because it's going underneath his shirt and I don't actually want any of the chest piece showing, only the sleeves, I decided to use the same pattern as his vest, but just trim it down to be even smaller. And then I also decided to widen the sleeve pattern itself to make them super baggy at the bottom. I've got to say, this doll is coming out so well that I think now it's time to start styling his hair. Because it was my first time ever doing this style of hair, I decided to do it off camera and then recreate it on this 90s Barbie doll, so don't judge that, it's the exact same style. I started by taking the hair and partitioning it into a half up, half down style and securing it with an elastic band. I can then take small strands of the hair separately and twist them up really tight until they bunch up into their own little tiny buns, and then I can tie them all together with an elastic band. After all of that was done, I did decide to cut the elastic bands and wrap the whole thing up in wire to make sure that it's more secure, because the elastic bands I have are really cheap and they seem to degrade really quickly, like over a week they just dissolve, and I didn't want this hairstyle to come loose, so make sure to secure them in whatever way I could. I'm so happy with how this came out. It really suits the vibe of the character, and it really helps show off that kind of glistening, shiny effect of his hair because there's so many twists and different ways that the light catches it. After the hair, we can now move on to the accessories. It feels like ages since I've actually cracked out the epoxy sculpt, but today we are using epoxy sculpt, so I make sure to mix together 2 equal parts from both A and B and mix them together to create this putty that will eventually cure over the space of 2 hours. I started by designing the form that I wanted on a piece of paper and just taping that to my table. After that, I can then sculpt the piece with epoxy sculpt on top of that drawing, and I don't have to worry about it sticking to the paper because the tape makes that barrier. For this design, to accentuate that water style that he's got going on, I wanted to make this deconstructed raindrop pattern that also kind of looks like waves at the right angle. Because I'm using such tiny little pieces of epoxy, I decided to use a needle to help me get into those really kind of complex curves on such a small scale. And now I can work on his next little emblem, which will be going on his crown. I wanted this like water drop effect like the chest, but I wanted it to be splashing out like it's hitting the ground. So I just designed that very simply out of 3 little balls of epoxy sculpt that I gave points to at the end and arranged them in a symmetrical pattern. Now at this point, I'm sure you're thinking the same thing as me of like, really? Grey clay? It's a bit boring for magical girls, which I agree, and I didn't want to paint it because I wanted something extra special, so I decided to cast this stuff with some silicone putty that I got from Hobbycraft so that I can later cast these with some resin and make some cool translucent blue effects. So just like the epoxy sculpt, you're going to want to get equal parts of each part of this stuff and mix it together, but this cures in about 5 to 15 minutes, so you've got to be really quick. But once it's done successfully, you can remove the objects and start using it as a mold for your resin. So I went through so much trial and error. I made about 6 different iterations of colors and glitter and glow in the dark, and I finally decided on going with a pale translucent blue with some blue mica powder and some blue glow in the dark pigments so that he has that extra magical glow to him when you see it in the dark. For the final part of this doll, I'm going to be showing you how I made his headdress. The main part of the headdress is just the kind of attachments you just watched me make just now, and the wire piece around his head, which is literally just wire wrapped around his head, and it feels like a waste of time to tell you how to do that. So I'm going to show you how I made the rain. I feel like Mr. Maker right now, if anyone gets that reference, but yes, I will show you the objects I used, and then I've got a little clip showing you how I did it. So first you will need invisible thread. Any thread of the invisible kind will work just well, fishing wire, anything like that, perfect. And then you will obviously need some rhinestones. These are Hot Fix rhinestones. I just didn't feel like buying any more, and I had these on hand, so some would say it's a waste of the hot feature, but I really don't mind. I chose to use the Aurora Borealis ones because they've got a really nice blue-pink shift reflection, which I think works well for like a shimmer of water type vibe. And then you'll also need trusty dusty Uhu glue. This stuff is great. I highly suggest you get some. Open a window because it does say on the bottle that it makes you dizzy, and it can if you use it a bit too much, but it works for everything, so good stuff. And then as well as that, you will need some scissors. Any scissors will do fine, not fabric scissors. Don't ruin your fabric scissors. Okay, so as I said, we are now going to be making the rain for this head crown. I'm starting with the invisible thread, and I am dabbing on a very small amount of Uhu glue just on the end. After that, I can get a rhinestone and stick it onto the end of the thread on one side. I mean, there's not really a side because it's thread, but just stick it on. And then we're going to repeat that process on the other side of the rhinestone so that we get a kind of sphere, so we get that both sides have a rhinestone on and it doesn't look unfinished from any one angle. With that, the doll is finally finished, and I'm so happy with how he turned out. I really want to thank Enchanterium for making this whole thing possible, and I want you to make sure to go over to their Instagram to see all the other participants that were part of this collab. It was just a brilliant thing to be a part of, and everyone's made such cool dolls and drawings and just creations. I just put him together for the first time, and I'm so happy with how he looks. He really fits in with the vibe and the style, and you guys just need to see him, so let's just get on with the reveal. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm really happy with how this doll turned out, and if you liked him too, please make sure to give this video a like and comment down below if you'd like to see more dolls in this magical girl style. Make sure to check out the work of all these incredible artists that were in the collab. You can find a showcase at the end of Enchanterium's video where they made Bloom as a smart doll, and you can also find them on Instagram underneath the Magical Team collab hashtag.